Hi everyone and welcome. It's definitely been a while since I filmed my last video. I think it was in the middle of January when I last uploaded. So if I'm a bit rusty, I'm sorry. Hopefully I'll get back into the hang of it in no time. Now I did ask which video you wanted to see most of all, and it seems like the majority of you wanted to know the type of books or which books exactly I read while I was off of BookTube. So that's perfect because I didn't do a wrap up for the entirety of 2023. So today I will be talking about all the books that I've read from the beginning of January up until the end of June. So I will not be talking about July just because that would be a nice mid-year check-in if I talk until the end of June, and also because I would like to do a July wrap-up and hopefully more or less recent or monthly wrap-ups going forward. Now, you might think that are a lot of books to talk about today, and you're right, but maybe not as much as you would think. Because in the first half of the year, I read 20 books in total. My reading speed has definitely been on and off. Sometimes I read multiple books in a month, and then I have some months that I have barely read anything, at least in the first half of the year. I have the feeling that it's getting more and more as time has progressed, and that's also why I felt the itch to start filming again, of course, because I was reading more. Now, of those 20 books, all of them are in the fantasy genre, no surprises there. One was YA and the other ones were adult or didn't have a specific age category attached to them. Now, it was more or less 50-50 between audiobooks and physical reads. However, I do think that for the second half of the year, and especially in September moving forward, I will be reading more and more physical reads and less audiobooks, because I will not have a long commute anymore. I am changing jobs starting the 1st of September, and while now I'm in the car 2 to 3 hours while I'm listening to audiobooks, because there's not really anything else to do and it makes the time a little bit more enjoyable to pass through, I will not be doing that anymore in September and moving forward. So I will be curious to see what happens, because I do enjoy audiobooks, and narrators that are very good at what they do really do uplift the experience for me. So we will see what happens, but I will still be listening to them when I'm doing daily chores, but it will not be anything close to 2 to 3 hours a day. So I'm quite curious to see how that will be moving forward. Now, for the wrap up, because I will be wrapping up these 20 books, I will not be going through them month per month. I will just, I think, categorize them into categories that sound logical in my head, with disappointments, DNFs, stuff like that. But I will be starting with series that I have started and completed in 2023. So I'm quite proud of myself, because even though there are only 3 of those, I feel like I've done a good job at starting a series and then finishing it in a normal amount of time, you could say. So without further ado, let's start with the first one. And that is the Daevabad trilogy by S.A. Chakraborty. So I have City of Brass here, which is the first one, then The Kingdom of Copper, and I've also read Empire of Gold, which is the third and final book, but I don't own it yet. So these are books that I listened to on audiobook, and I enjoyed the series, but I didn't love it. And I do think that was highlighted because I did read them almost back to back. So the things that I was a little bit agitated by really came to the forefront, instead of when I would read them with 6 months in between, for example. But I still enjoyed them for what it was, and I was happy that I finally got to them, because The City of Brass has been a book that has been on my TBR for quite a bit of time. And then I do think that The Kingdom of Copper was one that I got for my birthday last year. So they were highly anticipated, and it was really time that I got to them. In this first book, we meet Nari. Nari is a con artist in Cairo, and she has some magical abilities that she doesn't really quite understand. She basically has healing powers. Now, one day, one of her tricks goes wrong, and she accidentally summons a djinn who takes her to Daevabad, which is basically the capital city of djinns, and there she learns why she has these magical powers. Now, I enjoyed the first book because it had a very natural way of explaining that world to you, because Nari is new to that world. So of course, when she meets those djinns, the different factions, when she meets the royal family, as well as the crown prince and the second prince in command, she has to learn all of that, and you learn that alongside by her. So I really enjoyed that. However, as the series progressed, it was very clear that this is an extremely fast-paced series. It immediately dives into the story from the first book already, but that definitely continues in the second and the third book. And also that this is much more plot-driven than what I normally like. Now, I don't have a problem with plot-driven books per se, but I have often seen that when you have a plot-driven book, the characters are not developed in a way that I enjoy. And that was also the case here. We have our main character, and especially in the second book, and progresses towards the third, she does certain things, or drama is added to the story in order to progress the plot. And I think that that's something that you always do, because that's natural. When you write a book, you have a plot in mind and you will make your characters do certain things in order to have that plot unfold. But when it is done in an obvious way, or in a way that the characters would normally not react, like drama was added here and conflict between characters that shouldn't have been here, that was just not logical or a natural way to react, that's when I have a problem with it. So the main character in itself I didn't really like, and the side characters and especially the villains were not well developed. I think that the author tried to give a reason or a background to these villains, why they acted the way that they did, but it just really wasn't that believable for me. Now, I did really like the world building. I liked the plot in a way, I liked the magic, I liked the setting, which is almost Eastern inspired, and I really enjoyed all of that. But the characters in itself, I just really didn't like how they were developed. And although I liked the first and the second book, I think that the third one maybe was a little bit of a disappointment for me, just because by that time I was reading them almost back to back. I kind of had enough of the story. But still, happy that I read them, and I would really recommend them to people who like those fast-paced stories. And I think if you are in the middle of a lot of dense fantasy, this might be something to pick up, just because it's different and quite refreshing compared to those other epic fantasy series that can take quite a bit of time to get through. Now, I'm not exactly doing the mid-year book check-in or freak-out tag, but I do remember that one of the questions was, what is your biggest surprise of the year? And for me, that is the other series that I finished from start to finish. I read them in 2023, and that is the Greenbone Saga by Van der Lee. Now, I don't think that you can see it, but they're actually right there, so I'm not going to put them out of the shelves. I just put these shelves up. I'm not going to touch them, but I adore them. And if you've been on the channel for a longer time, you do know that I bought Jade City maybe before I went on BookTube, and I was basically just buying everything that I saw that was hyped. And at the time, Jade City was very much hyped. And then over time, I heard things about the series that made me realize I don't think that I'm going to like it. It was modern fantasy, you had cars, you had guns, it was very action-packed. It had a magic system that made your main characters almost superheroes. All of that sounds like things that I don't enjoy in fantasy. So it was actually on my 3 stars predictions list of books that I was hyped for, and now not anymore. However, a couple of months ago, I saw that it was available to me on audiobook, and I had that itch of, you know what, I have Jade City, I've had it for years now, maybe I should just give it a try. And if I don't like it, then I know and I can haul that book. However, I absolutely adored it. This is going to be one of my top 10 favorite series of all time. I don't know why. It has everything, as I said before, that I normally shouldn't like, but I enjoyed the drama so much. If you don't know, this is a series that is Asian inspired, and it is modern fantasy. It does take place in a secondary world where we follow these 2 clans who have Jade. And it almost feels like The Godfather, and I do know that a lot of people compare the series to The Godfather. It's basically exactly the same, with the only difference, of course, being that we have magic here. They have Jade, and Jade are, of course, these pearls that give them extra powers. But also, what they do is not necessarily illegal. It's really tied into the structure of the country. There are military schools who train these people to become Jade warriors, and they can then enlist in the clan. The clan has ties into politics, and of course they do some unsavory business as well, which could be illegal, but for the most part it is known who they are and what they do, and they are actually respected for that. Now, at the beginning we have 2 warring clans. You have the No Peak clan, who we follow most of all, but we also have the Mountain Clan. These are the biggest clans in the country, and they are basically combating. Now, I like most of all just the family drama, and seeing that there are no right decisions here. You can see these different people contemplating what they should do, and they all have justifications for their actions, but all of their actions have huge consequences for other people. I really like that. I like the character development here as well, and it was just so different from what I normally read, but I loved it. I love Jade City, which is very small, and you really follow that one family and get to know them. Then in Jade War, it opens up a little bit to the consequences of the rest of the world, and in Jade Legacy, which I know a lot of people didn't like, or didn't like as much because there are very big time jumps, you have the legacy of these Jade warriors. And I absolutely adored that. I did want to know more about, okay, this has such a big impact on the world, and you have people who are against these Jade warriors or these Jade clans, you have people who are for these Jade clans. what's going to happen next. So I really liked that Van Lee actually included that. So yes, a very big surprise in a good way. So I was very happy that I finally picked it up, and I had to buy the other 2 books because I just loved them so much. Another series that I was extremely pleasantly surprised by was the Broken Earth trilogy by N.K. Jemisin. This is the first N.K. Jemisin that I've read. I started, of course, with the 5th season, continued with The Stone Sky, and then finished with The Obelisk Gate. Now, this is a series that has been widely praised also outside of the fantasy community, and always when that happens I'm a little bit hesitant because I feel, well, will I like it then? And I'm also afraid that I will not understand the thematic importance of the series, stuff like that. However, I loved it. I loved the 5th season and then the continuations just as much. This is another series that will probably be in my top 10 favorite fantasy series of all time. I still need to remake that list, but a lot has changed since I last made that one. In this one, we follow 3 women who are origins. Now, in this world, and this is a post-apocalyptic world where we have Father Earth, and Father Earth is angry with humans. Origins have the ability to basically tamper with the world, with Father Earth, and create earthquakes and stuff like that. Now, because of that, they are actually seen as a danger to this world, because, of course, if you have an earthquake, this can be very dangerous to other people involved. So we follow these 3 origins in different stages of their lives and how being an origin affected them. And throughout the story, we also learn about the history of the Earth and why Father Earth is so angry with these humans. I love this book. Of course, it has some very strong thematic implications as well. We have the theme of slavery and what it means to be human, and how origins were basically stripped of their humanity, or how they are treated as tools almost. I loved this book. I loved how N.K. Jemisin was this entire series, how she was so angry. This is a very angry book. If that's something that you want to read about, if you want to have somebody who, when you read a chapter and you're trying to make apologies in your head or justifications of why something happened, and the author just slams it down in the next sentence, that's what this series is. But I loved it for that. I also think that it's just a very important series to give a try if you are interested in the history of fantasy and who are the big names in different eras. I don't know enough about that, but I do know that this is the type of fantasy that is very important in this day and age. So if that's something that you want to read, a more unique fantasy, then I would highly recommend this one. And I was very happy that I picked it up, that I was buddy reading it with people who are smarter than me. And this is just the perfect series to have discussions about. So yes, one that I would also highly recommend, and was very happy that I did read them almost back to back. Because I think for some series that highlighted for me, the things that I didn't like, but for this one, it highlighted what I did like. So yes, one that I adored, and I was very, very curious to pick it up. I didn't really know what to expect, a little bit nervous as well, but in the end, it all turned out for the best. Now, of course, there were also some series that I actually finished this year, 3 to be exact, if I'm not mistaken, but that I started previously. And one of those was the First Law series by Joe Abercrombie. I think that you can see some of them right here, but I don't have the final book, but that is, of course, The Wisdom of Crowds. Now, I must say that even though I really enjoyed that book, there were just some discrepancies, at least in my opinion, that I didn't like that much. Now, because it is the final book in a 9-book long series, I have not read Sharp Ends, which is a collection of short stories, but if you count the original trilogy, First Law, then the 3 standalones, and then the Age of Madness trilogy, it's 9 books in total. I cannot tell you too much about that final book, of course. But in the end, I think that the Age of Madness trilogy is my favorite trilogy of the whole lot, which says a lot, especially because we are following the next generation of characters mostly. So that is something that an author needs to be able to do to make you invested in these new characters. And I think that Joe Abercrombie did that in a very special way, and it shows that he is very good in crafting these characters, or at least in a way that I like. I also listened to this on audiobook, and I think that the narrator is absolutely perfect for this. The humor was again top-notch, and my favorite character of the entire series takes his appearance, or the first appearance of his, is in that final trilogy. There were some things that I absolutely loved in the conclusion. There were some things that I just thought were not really logical in big reveals that first I was taken aback, like, oh, I didn't see that coming, that's great. But when I thought about it more, I didn't see it coming because it didn't really feel like that was a logical reveal. So some of the things that happened, I think could have been explained better. The conclusion could have been done better maybe, but all in all, I was really glad that I finished the Age of Madness trilogy. And like I said, even though I had some minor complaints, all in all, I really enjoyed what Joe Abercrombie did with this world and with the evolution that is from First Law up until the end of Age of Madness. So again, one that I would highly recommend, even though I had the same problem with his original trilogy, where with the First Law trilogy, I really liked the first and the second book. The third one I liked up until the end, which I thought was a disappointment. And here with Age of Madness, it's a little bit of a similar feeling. Now, because I like his writing style so much, I will probably pick up anything else by Joe Abercrombie. I know that he's working on an urban fantasy, if I'm not mistaken, with werewolves, and normally that would not be my cup of tea, but just because it's Joe Abercrombie, I am going to give it a try. So if that tells you anything, there it is. And then of course another much beloved series that I finally finished, The Realm of the Elderlings, with the final book, Assassin's Fate. Now again, this is the 16th book in a series, 17th if you count the novella, so I cannot really tell you a lot, but most people know that this is my favorite series of all time, and the ending did not disappoint me. Now, what I will say is that with the final trilogy, we meet a new character. And even though that is definitely a risky move by an author, if you have already 13 books prior to this 14th book, she did so in a way that this new character is now one of my favorites. I do think that I like Fitz more still, just because I have a connection to him. And if you are with a character for so many books, it's very difficult to overstep that and have somebody that you like more, where you've only been with that character for 3 books, but it happens. I think that that new character is definitely my second favorite character, and we have different POVs by that character here as well, which again is a risky move, but I loved it. Now, I do think that for this final book, there were certain moments that I thought, this cannot be the end because it doesn't feel right. And it wasn't the end. And towards the end, when the end was revealed, it just felt the way that it should be. Now, it is left open in a way that I think that second POV, that new POV that we have here, could have a series or a trilogy of their own. And I hope that that happens because that would be an amazing story. So for Robin Hobb, I do hope that she writes a new series because the ending was open enough that she can come back to this world and write something amazing. What I also really liked here is that we have the inclusion of other parts of the world. You have, of course, the Live Ship Traders trilogy. You also have the Rainwild Chronicles quartet. And I know that a lot of people think, well, I don't want to read them because I want to read more about Fitz, and this takes place in a different part of the world. And I was the same. However, when it all comes together in this final trilogy, I do think that my enjoyment was increased because I had read those sub-series. So yes, just an amazing series all in all, and my favorite series of all time. So there's nothing really more to say here, I suppose. And then another series that I absolutely adore that I finally finished in 2023, and towards the start to be exact. That is Speaking Bones by Ken Liu, of course the 4th and final book in the Dandelion Dynasty. I loved this series from start to finish. There are some things that I don't like that much, but just because I adored everything else so much, I didn't really mind. In the first book, The Grace of Kings, of course, we almost have a prologue of an epic fantasy. We have 2 classes who are fighting against each other, and towards the end, you have one that is now ruling, one ruling family. And although most fantasies would stop there, Ken Liu takes the question of what happens next. And he takes 3 books to expand on that. In The Wall of Storms, which is the second book in this series, we expand and broaden the world, which is still my favorite book of the entire series. But then in the 3rd and the 4th book, we deal with these consequences. And I love that. This is also a multi-generational story where you follow the different generations of this royal family and of other families as well, and what happens to this country, to the world in general, over time. I loved Speaking Bones. I think that this conclusion is exactly what I wanted, and I love the characters in this book. Gia is one of my favorite characters of all time. And I know that there are a lot of characters here who are extremely complex and they make choices that you think are awful, but they believe that that's what they need to do. And those are the type of characters that I like most of all. You can't understand them, but you can respect them for what they are trying to do and what they think is the right thing. Absolutely adored this. This also has a villain that is very well done. And again, this is something that I think you need to be a very good author to do so. This villain doesn't feel like this mustache-twirling villain who is just bad. And why is he bad? Well, he likes to do evil things. No, this villain is so complex, but still, you hate him towards the end of the book. An ending that was perfect. Now, I must say that Ken Liu likes to talk about a lot of technologies and new inventions, and he likes to explain how they are made and how they work. And I don't really like that much. Luckily, it's not a big part of these books, but I usually skim through them. I do think that they are very well crafted and they are ingenious, but I just don't really care because I can't picture it in my brain. So I'm like, well, if you just tell me what it does, that's fine. But like I said, that is just a minor thing that I don't like. It's a personal preference because everything else was so good. I absolutely adore this series. It's not for everybody, but I would say give Grace of Kings a try, give The Wall of Storms a try, and if you don't like The Wall of Storms, then you can stop because that is the best book in the series, and also it's quite similar to the two that come afterwards. But yes, one that I am so glad that I got the chance to read. Now, I also read some standalones, and some of these are definitely out of my comfort zone, but I enjoyed the majority, so that's something. The first one is Habibi by Craig Thompson. Now, this is a graphic novel. So as you can see here, beautiful images, and I really liked the art and the illustrations here. In this one, we follow two people, and they are basically two very young children who are left alone at the side of the road, and they take care of each other, and you follow them through the different stages of their lives. This has a lot of influence of Islam and Christianity, and how it is similar in some ways, different in other ways, and how these two main characters live their lives with a lot of you see a lot of religion throughout these books, and how one of the characters is basically telling stories to the other one, and they include religion quite a bit. Now, I must say that I don't really know a lot about graphic novels, so I'm probably not the best person to give a review here, but I enjoyed it. However, it wasn't something that I loved. I loved the illustrations most of all. I did like the two characters and their connection with each other and how their relationship evolved over time, but that's it. And for such a big book, it didn't really have a very long-lasting impression here. So one that I'm happy I gave a try. I had it on my shelves for a long time, but not one that I'm going to think back on very fondly, just one that I enjoyed reading. And the same thing can be said for The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches. This is by Sanghu Mandana. And this is, of course, a standalone. It is fantasy romance. It's very cozy fantasy. It's something that I normally don't pick up. However, towards the end of last year, I had a feeling that maybe I should give it a try. And at the beginning of this year, I gave it a try. Now, it's fun, it's very sweet, and it's something that I read, I enjoyed. It was a very quick read, but I'm not going to think about this again, and I also don't really feel the need to pick up anything similar. In this one, we meet a witch in our own world, and she is a secret witch. She is part of the Secret Society of Irregular Witches because she is not allowed to speak to other witches. The head woman, you can say, is of the belief that if you want to survive, if you don't want to have another witch hunt, you need to be a witch in secret and you don't need to interact with other witches. But our main character, therefore, is very lonely. However, at a certain point in time, she receives an email of people who are looking for a teacher. And that teacher needs to be a witch, or maybe a nanny, more precise. Because they have 3 small witches with them. They are in their care, they live in this big estate far away in the middle of nature. And they don't really know how to teach them to basically power or to use their magic in a way that they don't burn down the house. Of course, when she arrives at that estate, there is one grumpy man who has trauma of his own, and she's very bubbly, and they meet, and well, everybody can probably imagine what happens next. This is a feel-good story. I have not read TJ Klune, but I think if you like something like that, if you like to have that feeling of being hugged by a warm blanket, this is probably your cup of tea. One that I liked, but nothing really special and nothing that I'm going to gravitate towards in the future. And then the final standalone that I read was A Pocket Full of Crows by Joanne M. Harris. Now, Joanne M. Harris is an author that I wanted to try previously as well, because she has written a lot of Norse myth-inspired stories. I think that The Gospel of Loki is an example, and I have rune marks by her. But I've also read, or I've known by other booktubers, that she has written quite a bit of original fairy tales, and this is one of those. So A Pocket Full of Crows, it says, love made her a prisoner, revenge will set her free. A modern fairy tale of love, loss, and revenge. This is a perfect modern classic. So this is a very quick read, of course. As you can see, you have beautiful illustrations in the middle as well. And this story is told over the course of a year. So you have different parts of the story that are basically the different months. So it starts in, I want to say something like August, and then it continues until July the next year. And in this one, we meet a very wild girl who lives in the forest, and she falls in love with, I think it's the son of a duke. And she basically changes her entire appearance, her entire personality to please him. But something happens. It is a tale of revenge. I love this. This is also based on child ballads, and at the middle or at the beginning of each month, you see these ballads or small part of it. I loved how this was written. This is very whimsical. There's this very strong connection to nature, a lot of metaphors to nature that I absolutely adored. So I'm definitely going to give her other fairy tales a try, and then also her myths, because I do think that the Norse myths will probably be written in a different tone, not as whimsical, but yes, very much a fan of this one, and one that you can easily pick up between very big books. If you like fairy tales, fairy tale retellings, original fairy tales, this is definitely one that I would highly recommend. And then I also have some parts of series that I didn't finish. Either I started but didn't finish, or I continued a series that I started previously but haven't finished yet. So it will be clear once I start my pile. The first one that I have here is The Wolf of Orinjaro by K.S. Veloso. This is the first book in the Chronicles of the Wolf Queen. It's formerly known as the Chronicles of the Bitch Queen. Now, this is actually the first book that I read in 2023, so I don't have a monthly wrap-up of this, but I did talk about this in a weekly update. And even though I was quite positive about it back then, I'm not going to continue with the series. It's fine, but I didn't love it. In this one, we meet a queen who became queen by marrying somebody from a different clan. You basically have two very big clans in this country, and in order to keep all factions happy, two clan members of the different clans married each other and they became this royal couple. However, her husband disappeared and she got a child by him, but because he disappeared, of course, this country now has a lot of tension because only one of these clan families is in charge because, well, the other part disappeared. At a certain point, she receives a letter from her husband saying, "I'm in this neighboring country, please come and meet me, we need to talk." And everybody thinks that this is a trap, but she still goes. And well, she finds herself stranded in this neighboring country. She doesn't really know how she's going to get home. I liked this book, but again, I had some issues with the main character. First of all, I liked the world. It was very low in fantasy, but towards the end, you can see some darker fantasy being present, which I found very promising for the second and the third and final book in this series. But the main character has she makes certain decisions that just aren't logical. And sometimes you're in her head and she is very capable of thinking things through and seeing what's the best way to go about things. And then she can say something to someone that is just not consistent with what you've seen her think beforehand. And that I found quite annoying. Just like with the Daevabad trilogy, I felt like sometimes the character needed to do something that was just stupid, and you know that she's smarter than that, just to move the story forward, which I find just not as enjoyable. So even though this was a fine read, and I think that I gave it maybe 4 stars at the beginning of the year, I think that I would give it 3, middle of the road. That's not enough for me to continue reading. I was not extremely invested in these characters, so I also didn't really need to know what happened next. Maybe I'll come back to this trilogy, but for now, I've read the first one and that's just fine by me. Now, another one that I started, and this is actually a reread of one of my favorite series, A Game of Thrones by George R.R. Martin, of course the first book in the Song of Ice and Fire series. I know that I was part of a read-along, or was hosting a read-along together with some other amazing booktubers, and I also know that I read the first book and then I was MIA. Now, part of it is of course that I took a break of booktube for mental health and all of that stuff. Another part was that I'm terrible at rereads. I'm sorry, I can't do it. Especially, and this was not the best decision that I've ever made, I was also rewatching the TV show, and especially the first few series or the first few seasons follow the first few books quite well. So if you have seen the TV show, you know what happens here, and I already knew what happened. So I was just not really invested. Of course, if Winds of Winter ever comes out, I will reread the series, or at least I will skim read it. But for now, I was not invested enough to reread all of these books, especially if you've seen, I have only read 20 books in the first half of the year. So rereading all of these would be a very big chunk of reading time that I would then rather spend on new books. So even though I love this series, I highly recommend this series, I just really didn't feel the need to reread them just yet. And then another series that I started, and I do hope to finish it in the second half of the year because this is just a duology, and that is Sailing to Sorrentium by Guy Gavriel Kay. Now, I have read one book by him before at the end of last year, and I actually have a spoiler-free review for that book because I absolutely adored it. Now, Guy Gavriel Kay is the kind of author that a lot of people say if you like Robin Hobb, you will probably like his writing style as well, and that was definitely true for me. It had a very similar quality to them. Now, I do go through these books much slower than I go through a Robin Hobb book because he has standalones or duologies, maybe a trilogy, but most of his books are connected to each other, but they follow different people, and It takes a little bit of time, for me at least, to connect to the characters and to understand what the world is about. And I think that Robin Hobb is a little bit more acquired to my taste than Guy Gavriel Kay, but I still really enjoy his works, and the same can be said for Sailing to Sarantium. Now in this one we follow Crispin, and Crispin is summoned to Sarantium, which is, well, this takes place in a secondary world, but it's very reminiscent of the Byzantine Empire of our own world. He gets summoned to Sarantium by the emperor to provide a work of art. But when he goes there, before he leaves, he gets a secret quest from his own queen. And I think if you like Crispin, and I really enjoyed Crispin as a character, that you will really enjoy this book. It has a little bit more magic than what I saw in his previous works, or his previous work, one, but it is still very low in magic. All of these people have no magic, and the only magic that you would see is from the old gods of this country. That's it. But it's still more than in the other book by him that I have read. I still want to read more of him, and I think that his character work is superb, but I think that maybe his female characters can use a little bit more work. Especially what some of the secondary female characters here do does not really feel very logical to me after everything that they've been through. So those were a couple of moments that pulled me out of the story, because I couldn't really quite believe that that would happen in this situation, but still it wasn't as aggravating that I completely disliked it. It's just a little work point that I would think Guy Gavriel Kay would probably, if he would work on that, I think that I would enjoy his novels more. But beautiful writing style. I really enjoyed the story in itself. It's extremely slow. So again, if you like Robin Hobb, you'll probably like this as well. But I will be picking up the second book rather soon. And then a series that I started but I really didn't like, and this is that one YA book that I talked about, This Woven Kingdom by Tahereh Mafi. Now this is the first book in, well, it doesn't really say that it is a trilogy, but it is, believe me, and I picked it up because I had a coupon and my husband bought this for me. I thought it was a standalone. It was not. This is YA, and honestly I don't really know a lot about it. We follow one main character. There is some kind of love triangle, but this is slow. This is so extremely slow, and I like slow, but this is boring. Nothing happens here. We are just in the head of this one character who is not really special. She's not really entertaining, and that's what happens. And towards the end we have this big finale, so I do imagine that in the second book the world really opens up, but this first one did not convince me that I'm interested to see what happens next. So yeah, I think that this was 2 stars. Maybe I should have given it 1 star, because really I didn't like it at all. But still happy that I tried it. I read it a couple of months ago and I cannot tell you what it's about. And that's usually a very bad sign. Cannot recommend this, to be honest. And I have not read a lot of YA, but what I have heard other people say, this is not it. This is not a peak of YA. So if you want to try YA, just like me, do not pick this one up. Just choose a different book that has more going on and more interesting main characters. And then I also continued The Drowning Empire, and you can see those right here. It's the green book colorblind. It's the blue book. So the first one is The Bone Shard Daughter. Again, I have a spoiler-free review for that one, which I made last year, and now I read The Bone Shard Emperor. And as you can see, I also have The Bone Shard War, which was a new release, but I'm waiting to read that one because I loved The Bone Shard Emperor. I'm really happy that I picked it up, but there is a villain that I didn't quite enjoy that much, and you see more of him in the second book. I don't even know if you've seen him in the first one, to be quite honest. I don't think so. And I think that he will play a bigger role in the third and final book. So I'm just letting it marinate. I think that this is the type of series that, because it's so far out of my comfort zone, what I usually like in fantasy, that it's best if I leave some time in between. The first one was a surprise because it is fast-paced fantasy. It is more plot-driven. The characters are not as well developed as I usually like in fantasy, but I found all of them very enjoyable, and I thought that all of them had very distinct character traits that I found nice to read about. Also, in the first book we have a lot of mystery about this bone shard magic, about our main character that we are following and what her role is going to be. And towards the end of that first book we do have a conclusion of that mystery, more or less. So I was a little bit hesitant and nervous to pick up that second book, because am I going to have that same pull of mystery, or is this finally going to be the book that's just not for me? However, there was new mystery and there were new questions to unravel and to find an answer to, so I really liked that. I still like Bone Shard Daughter more than Bone Shard Emperor, and we will see if Bone Shard War will be a disappointment for me, because I have seen some people say that they didn't like it as much as the first two, but still a book that I really enjoyed. And I think if you like something like the Daevabad trilogy, you'll probably like this as well. I think these are two similar types of fantasy series, and I think that for now at least, the Broken Empire, it's not. This is the Drowning Empire is the better one of the two, or at least the one that worked best for me so far. But like I said, I still need to read that third and final book, of course. Now, I did mention that I was also going to talk about DNFs, but at this point I only have one DNF, and that is The Once and Future King by T.H. White. I started reading this in January. I already talked about the fact that I DNF'd it just because it wasn't what I wanted to read. I wanted to read more King Arthur this year. Surprise, surprise, I haven't done so yet. But I have heard that The Once and Future King by T.H. White is one of those staples, one of those classics that you need to read. And because of that, I wrongfully thought that this is going to be a very dense, a very difficult book to read, and this is really going to be the start of King Arthur and the Legend. No, it's a children's book, which is completely fine. I don't have an issue with that, but that was not what I was going for, and I really didn't like the story in itself. I wasn't invested at all. Maybe I'm also not that invested in King Arthur in itself, but I think that if I would like to read about it, it's more of almost an historical context with low magic, almost like historical fiction, and not this children's book where Merlin and Arthur and all of that, well, it's fine for children. It's not for me, unfortunately. So that is one of the books that I DNF'd, and I think that that's the only one. I am in the middle of quite a bit of books, and if you're interested in that, I can make a currently reading video, which is probably going to have 9 to 10 books, and some of them I might DNF moving forward, but for now they're still on pause. So these are all of the books that I read so far in 2023. Please let me know if you've read any of them and what your thoughts were. And also let me know how your reading year has gone so far and what your favorite book was that you've read, so I can check it out as well. As always, I hope that you enjoyed this video, and see you next time. Bye!